Hey there, Transformers. Happy Thursday lunchtime hour. If you're tuning in with us live, I hope that you are enjoying this beautiful weather. At least we're having beautiful weather here in Kansas City. I hope that's true across the country. I spoke with my sister this morning in Indiana. She was loving her day. And it truly is like those first little glimpses of fall. And I love it. I love being able to wear a sweater and not be sweating through it. So
Yeah.
if you're watching us on replay, make sure you drop a comment, say hashtag replay. That way I can make sure to say hello to you. But I'm thrilled to have you here either way for today's Lunch and Learn series. I have a very special guest with me, someone who also lives in the Kansas City area and is working on changing the way that we view food, nutrition, and our relationship with our bodies. So please join me in welcoming Chioma Atanmo. So welcome, Chioma.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. And like you said, the weather is like the humidity is gone. So I am just loving it. I woke up, just my windows were open. I was just like, this is nice. I like this.
I know. I just want to pause this period of time and live in it for forever with this gorgeous sun and these cooler temperatures. It's amazing.
Agreed.
Chime in the comments if you live somewhere where it is consistently 75 during the day and 58 at night, because we're going to move there.
Yeah. Let us know.
All right. So Chioma, you've founded a business called The Mindful Appetite, correct?
Yes.
Okay, tell us a little bit about Mindful Appetite.
Yeah, so Mindful Appetite was birthed out of me trying to figure out what life was like post-athlete career. So I grew up playing soccer, running track. Soccer was the sport that I played the longest for about 12, 13 years. And when I got to college, unfortunately, I had an injury my senior year of high school that jeopardized my scholarship in college. So I couldn't run track my senior year. And with a knee injury, it's just like you think you're invincible when you're an athlete until you're not. And then I felt like all the compounding injuries that I've been suppressing over the years started to surface. So then it was like, okay, my knees started to hurt, then my ankles, then my back, and all these things came into play that, just prevented me from getting back on the field. And when I tried to walk on to the team, the coach told me I was not fit enough. And, your body, you gain weight, you lose muscle, you're figuring out how to eat again, you're figuring out how to exercise, how to stretch. You realize that you're not as mobile as you thought you were, or flexible. And when I couldn't play anymore, I wanted to still stay connected to the game. So I started working in soccer, started off as an intern, became the assistant fitness coach, went back to school to study nutritional sciences because I changed my major 3 times. And throughout that journey, I was working with athletes who were either in their college career, towards the end of their career, or, older players trying to still get that professional contract. So as a fitness coach and nutritionist, talking to the players, I was doing presentations and I was letting them know hey, you need to eat this way and exercise this way. And nobody wants to really hear that when you still feel good and you're still playing at a high level. So it wasn't until after they retired that they were like, hey coach, I remember you were talking to me about vegetables and yoga and meditation and visualization. So, okay, I'm ready to listen now. But it was because it was their last resort. They were no longer in that sports space. And so it took me 6 years to figure out what that journey was like, what worked for my body and all those things. And I still feel like I'm still understanding what works for my body. But that's kind of how Mindful Appetite was birthed, out of, figuring out how life can move on, no longer playing a sport. So
I really resonate with that. Having been a college soccer player as well, we share that in common, a background in sports and in soccer. And I definitely remember that when I was in high school, when I was in college, I could eat whatever I wanted. I was just moving my body so much at such a high intensity that there was not a thought about nutrition. And granted, I played at smaller schools with smaller budget. So we did not have access to resources where people were teaching us about how to properly nourish our bodies for sport. But it was definitely also not as prevalent of a conversation 10, 15 years ago as it is today, where I had a cousin who played college soccer a couple of years ago, and they did have those type of resources available for their team. And it was a very different approach to how they prepared their body for the game. But, there's that change then when you're no longer the athlete, where your relationship with your body shifts, right? You've carried this identity as athlete for so long, and however you went about it, it's going to shift. And I know that's a big part of how you work with your clients, but can you talk to us a little bit about what that process tends to look like when we're not being really intentional about that transition?
Yeah. So when you're not intentional about that transition, when your career is over, it can feel like, you're just like running into a wall with just like, okay, what's next? You're like stripped away of all these resources. You no longer have the support of like maybe your teammates or your coaches who would normally push you. And when athletes reach out, it's almost like this is my last resort. Like, I don't know what else to do. So a huge part is that mindset shift, understanding that, okay, when you were playing, you were burning so many calories. Your Apple Watch may be lying to you about how many calories you think you're burning in the gym, working out on your own, or you're not understanding that the foods that you're eating are not being processed the same way. So for example, if you are a soccer player, you're a professional soccer player, you're playing the majority of the 90 minutes, I'm sure it's like you're running anywhere from 7 to 9 miles. So sometimes the quality of your food doesn't necessarily, it's not as important for you because you're eating so much to make sure you have the energy for the game. When you are no longer playing and training, it's like, what is your energy expenditure now? And it's not as much. So it's going from maybe burning 4,000, 5,000 calories a day to like maybe 2,500, 3,000.
Yeah.
And knowing that your muscle composition is going to change. The mental energy is going to shift from like, okay, being focused on the game to maybe focused to a new career that you may have not really had that practice in. So
yeah,
really letting them know that like, okay, there's a mindset shift that's going to happen. You have to really know what is like your new identity, and also mourning the loss of that, athlete persona. And I think that's the biggest part, is really making sure that you allow that time to mourn the loss of that identity, but like also understanding that like, hey, it can still show up in other parts of your life. So it's not like a forever gone type of thing.
Yeah. I think that was a mistake that I made coming out of sport, coming out of that career of being so active, was that like I tried to hang on to that identity of being an athlete. And I do refer to myself as an athlete now. I have a body. It was made to move. It moves very differently than it did 15 years ago. Not only in speed and grace, but also in, just the type of movement that I do now. Aside from kicking a soccer ball around with my son, I haven't played soccer in close to a decade. But it was hard for me as I was making this transition and trying to cling to the identity of athlete, of really understanding what my body needed. And I went through the up and the down, right? So I was still eating as if I was an athlete, but I wasn't moving as though I was an athlete. And so weight gain came with that. And then I was mortified that I had gained weight because I'm an athlete and I need to have an athletic form. And so then I started the calorie restriction, the over exercising, and developed a lot of those patterns of behavior that are commonly thought of as orthorexia. And I know that there are other folks in the Kansas City area as well who are really focusing on that transition out of orthorexia. But is this something that sometimes comes up as you're working with the type of clientele that you work with?
Yeah, because as athletes, we identified our bodies with our performance, with how we physically looked. We assumed that six-pack abs meant that you were fit and you were disciplined. And your physical body is something that shows up every day. You can't hide your body as an athlete. And understanding that my body as a defender, I had really thick legs. I was a stockier, stronger person, but then going into track, I struggled with like all my friends here, they're sprinters, they're a lot thinner than me. I had coaches that would make comments of like, should you be eating that? Are you sure? Okay, body in soccer, great. But like in track as a jumper and sprinter, they're like, you need to lose 10 pounds. And for me, I'm like, I don't even know how to like lose 10 pounds, but you're thinking like simple math, eat less, lose weight. And then when that doesn't work, you're like, okay, I'm only eating twice a day. Okay, continue to restrict. But when you start to get those results that you feel physically, just from like how your body looks, not understanding that that is mentally and emotionally draining you, it's like you don't really understand how all of that stuff kind of compiles to just an unhealthy form of disordered eating that you carry on into adulthood. So it's you see it a lot because it's hard to not jump on the scale and assume that you're failing if the number is not what you feel it should be. And athletes were numbers-based, performance-based. We use data to track how we do. So it's a hard shift. And like, I'm not saying that I'm perfect at it. I still like on a regular basis have to understand that like, okay, we're still in a pandemic. Our bodies have gotten us through this really challenging year and a half. I'm grateful for this body. So I put on a little bit of weight. That doesn't mean that I'm a failure in some way. So it's a daily, it's a relationship with your body. How can you affirm the body that you have, but what also feels good for your body? What do you know is best for your movement? What type of eating do you need to have to give you that energy for the day? Where do you find that you need the most energy? If you're restricting all day and then by 2:00 you're crashing, like, it's just making sure people are aware of all these different points that happen in their life. And as athletes, it's like train, you went to school, train, rest, train, maybe work. Everything was so structured. And now you're like, go out into the world, my child, and figure it out.
Yeah. I think women in general, and men to a certain extent too, we're already fairly preoccupied with what our bodies are supposed to look like because of pop culture and societal standards and whatnot. But then, as you mentioned earlier, when your life has been kind of structured around the fact that you're successful as an athlete, right? So your body is providing this level of success. So now there's an additional data point of like the importance of your body. And what are some of the ways that you work with clients to really shift that relationship with the body away from it's important what you look like, it's important how strong you are, or it's important how fast you are, because your success in the sport is dependent upon it, into a body for life, right? Like a body for all of the rest of those things. What are some of your structured teaching points for that?
Yeah, so I would say it's more of about bringing awareness to how do you operate on a day-to-day basis? What are your needs for the day, and how can we make sure that you're prepared for that? So I like to structure every week. It's like making 4 focus points to work on. So whether it's like relationships, your health, your family, or like your business in some kind of way, how do you feel like you're performing? And food, it's our bodies. I feel like we resort or we minimize how impactful food is, but food is communication to your body of how it's going to feel on a regular basis. So when you are mindful of like, okay, I'm eating this in the morning because I know that I have low energy at 10 or 12 o'clock, or I know I have an important meeting. It's like, okay, it's okay to eat. When you get home, do you still have energy to maybe engage with your family? What are your relationships like with your friends? All those things. So it's funny when people reach out to me, they're like, okay, just tell me what to eat and I'll do it. And you're just like, okay, like I can tell you what to eat, but I find that most people don't stick to that. So that's why I shifted my coaching program to focus on a lot of just the day-to-day feelings on how your body feels, and just raising awareness on how your body feels on a day-to-day basis. Are you getting enough sleep? If you're exercising, are you exercising to close the rings on your Apple Watch, but it's not maybe joyful for you anymore? So you're associating exercise with like shrinking my body and feeling like, okay, check this box. But like, are you moving because like it makes you feel good? You have endorphins that like it springs off positive feelings in your body. Yeah. And I think when people think of it that way, then they're like, oh, I never thought of like exercise to be fun. Or maybe exercise to you was always, in my head, training for track. It always meant that if I was like, leaning over, about to vomit, like I was like so sore the next day. I'm like, oh, I crushed it. I'm like, that was a workout. Not knowing that going for a hike, a leisurely hike outside, can be just as beneficial. Going for a walk and having like a walking meeting. Like if I know that I'm maybe doing a Zoom call and I don't really have to show the camera and I can still be engaged, let's go outside and get some vitamin D exposure. So when people start to like almost like dissociate like exercise, pain, progress, that doesn't always have to be the case. And even how you eat, do you enjoy the food you eat, or do you eat it because you feel like it's going to get you a certain result and that's what you think you're supposed to be eating? So it's every person's different. So it's okay, how do you look at food? How do you look at movement? How are your day-to-day interactions with people? If you find that you're always irritable, if you find that, you don't have a good relationship with your family, like all of that stuff still impacts you mentally and emotionally. So yeah, it's just raising awareness. I know that's a handful, but raising awareness on just how you show up every day and how food and exercise plays a role in that.
Yeah, I think you put that really well. And one thing that really resonates with my messaging as well is like, when we're shifting into a different career outside of sport, whatever that looks like, if it's in an office environment, if it's not in an office environment, like you can still apply some of what you learned as an athlete in this new capacity, right? And like, how are we preparing our body for the work of the day, for the competition of the day, right? Which is being as productive as possible, and asking yourself what you want to experience out of that day. Does the day demand a nuance different than the day before? Whether that's you want to experience some pleasure, that might change the way that you're thinking about food that day. Whereas if you just want to have a day where you're, no digestive issues, no low energy issues, I don't want to have to think about my body groaning at all today, you're going to make different decisions, right? So I really love this concept of like, well, let's think about our working body as if it were preparing for an athletic event or a competitive event, in how we sleep ahead of time, how we nourish our body ahead of time, and then throughout the day, how we're, managing the stress, right? Exercise is acute stress. Work might be more episodic or chronic stress, but all of this can kind of, and of course, I'm an engineer by trade, so I'm like I'm solving equations in the back of my head very stereotypically at all times, but it feels a little bit like this painting that we get to paint every day, or the Tetris problem that we get to solve every day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and every day, every 24 hours, it's like, it's a chance to like start anew. Like, just because like maybe you did well for 5 days and then you woke up and you didn't do what, like, doesn't mean that like it canceled all of that progress too. So it's giving yourself that grace to know that, like, I had a very stressful day at work. I work 2 jobs, so I still have my 9 to 5 and I have my business, and we're in a heavy event season. So sometimes, like, not going to the gym is the best choice for me in that moment, and not feeling like I'm punishing myself by, like, okay, I'm going to restrict now the next day because I didn't go to the gym. So it's having people just be aware on a day-to-day basis. What is that competition level like? What do you have going on during the week? If you know you have a heavy event on the weekend, what can you do leading up to the weekend to make sure that you are fully present and that you're not in this, like, reaction mode of, like, okay, let me eat whatever's around. Let me hate myself for the next couple days and then feel like it's going to take me 2 weeks to, like, rebound back. So yeah, like, giving yourself grace is a huge part of that. As athletes, we're very hard on ourselves. We're very critical. It's like, we're very, data driven. It's like, there's winner and loser, like, numbers don't lie. So just giving ourselves that grace is what we need to.
So my final question for you is, if someone's watching this video today and they're thinking, I'm really having a hard time with this transition away from being an athlete and into the next phase of my life, what are 3 things? And I know it's impossible to ask ourselves to, like, tell me your 3 solutions, but what are some simple steps that someone can do to give a little bit of peace and reassurance that good things are coming and that their body is good?
Yeah, I would say if you can find some time each day to just practice stillness. It doesn't have to necessarily be like meditation or prayer. And I think when people hear meditation, they think you have to be, sitting down cross-legged and, like, chanting for 30 minutes. It can be as easy as 5 minutes or something at, like, 60 seconds, doing, like, the 4-second box breathing method, where you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds. And we just don't have a lot of time to just be still and in our bodies. We're attached to our phones. We're hyper-stimulated with all these things. So if you can find, like, 1 minute or 5 minutes a day to just practice stillness, to just give yourself a break and check in with your body, I would say you'll continue to build on that. And that can build to 5 minutes. It can build to 10 minutes, and it can be a routine that you find some peace in for your body. Another thing is drinking enough water. I think a lot of us, we underestimate the value of just keeping our bodies hydrated. Your body is made up primarily water. Your muscles are made up of 75% water. And when it comes to even just, like, snacking or eating, the part of your brain that actually registers whether you're hungry and if you're dehydrated, it's in the same part of your brain. So it actually registers most of the time that, like, oh, you're hungry, when in reality you're just dehydrated. So if you just hydrate your body, at least you're giving your body that opportunity to perform on a regular basis versus at a deficit when you're dehydrated. And the third part is, I would say, just, like, try new things. Maybe what worked for you as an athlete, or what worked for you. Like, I think of when I first stopped playing, I was still hitting the gym really hard, thinking that I had to do that in order to keep that up. But I hated working out, like, the way that I was working out in high school and college. So it's now understanding, like, okay, what is my schedule? What do I find joy in? And incorporating that into my workout. So I love going into the sauna and stretching. Yoga has been something that I really liked to do. So don't be afraid to try new stuff. And what worked for you 10 years ago may not work for you now, but just try new things. You may surprise yourself.
Absolutely. Those are wonderful. And I will say, you will never, ever, ever again find me on an elliptical machine, simply because I have never enjoyed being on an elliptical machine. Never. I used to do it because I thought I needed to burn X amount of calories. But it never, ever provided me joy. And now when I move, it is as an expression of joy, and makes me feel strong, makes me feel capable of taking on the day. And that will not happen with an elliptical. Props to those who love ellipticals. I am not expressing a judgment against them. It's just my own experience with them. Chioma, thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to put your website up on the screen, but if someone wanted to connect with you socially, how could they do so?
Yeah, I'm the most active on Instagram, so it's just chioma.atanmo on Instagram, Twitter, I believe it's the same thing, Facebook, you can find me on mindfulappetite.com or Mindful Appetite by Chioma Atanmo. And then my website has all my contact information. So I'm pretty responsive too, or if you just shoot me an email, chioma@mindfulappetite.com. So yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for spending a little bit of your Thursday with us. I sincerely appreciate it. Folks, make sure that you remember to follow, subscribe, depending on the platform you're watching, so that you can catch this content every Thursday and get reminders of these conversations. I'll be solo next Thursday, but the month of October will be packed full of some more incredible guests who are going to be talking to us across all number of topics. So it's going to be great. Look forward to that. I appreciate you today. And for those who are watching present or in the future, thanks for being here today as well. All right.
Thank you. See ya.
Bye.